It's My Nerd World and a Star Wars show. On this week's episode, Lucasfilm desperately needs a PR person. Can they just tell a story? Unfortunately, the current director for the new Star Wars Rey film stepped in it with some commentary on CNN. I'll talk a little bit about that. A what if Star Wars crossover? And have we been seeing what could potentially be looked back on as a classic Star Wars era in the making, and we just simply didn't recognize it this whole time? As always, if you want to email, you can do that, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. And if you want to support My Nerd World, head on over to Amazon.com. Look for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK or MyNerdWorld.net, and check out my science fiction space opera series. I'll have more details on that at the end of today's episode. Now, let's get to the show.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you. Just let it in.
It is My Nerd World. Welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice, and welcome to 2024. Happy New Year. I hope you had a fantastic holiday. As always, as I mentioned, if you want to email TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the stories that we talk about on this week's episode, and I do have some listener feedback to share as well. Brand new year, not a lot going on storytelling-wise, but Star Wars is in the news in some curious ways and in some not so great ways. I've actually posted a video up, and I did this over the holidays based off of one of the stories that I'm about to talk about here on the show. And I'm going to play you back the audio from that video for those that didn't have a chance to see it, commenting on the comments by Charmaine Obaid-Chinoy, who is currently, and we'll see how long this lasts, the director of one of the expected live-action, or I should say live-action, one of the expected big-screen Star Wars movies coming in the next few years. Unfortunately, she made some comments and stepped in it, and that has also prompted individuals to unearth some other commentary from this director that has a lot of fans and, honestly, myself concerned, even before the cameras start rolling. Now, I'll say up front, I still plan on seeing this movie when it gets released, but this is not the way you want to begin hyping your films. Also, this interesting story of a potential Marvel-Star Wars crossover that didn't happen, probably for good reason. Before we get to that, though, let's talk a little bit about the stories themselves, and I just want to do a quick commentary. News came out over the course of the past few days that The Mandalorian was one of the top streaming shows on Disney+. Ahsoka was up there as well. And I've mentioned the frustrations that I had with the Kenobi series, with the Book of Boba Fett. I enjoyed Mandalorian Season 3, not as much as the first two seasons, but I really did enjoy it. And I've expressed my love of Ahsoka that I continue to do rewatches of. It really is my favorite of the Disney era live-action shows. And quite honestly, it surpassed, for me, I'm enjoying this more even more so than I did Mandalorian Season 1. Now, that's also subjective on my part because Ahsoka really embodies more of the complete Star Wars storytelling that I enjoy, that has the Force and fantasy element up front and not kind of pushed off into the background. I like the mythology of the Mandalorian and what was done in Mandalorian Season 1, 2, and 3, but the stories of the Jedi, along with the spaceships and everything else, Ahsoka gives me everything as a fan that I want, and I just find the storytelling to be more compelling. I really like the arc that takes place over the course of those episodes and telling one cohesive story rather than a through line of a story that runs in the background of Mandalorian with these weekly adventures that take place. Different types of storytelling. I prefer the storytelling that took place in Ahsoka. That being said, we know that we're more than likely going to get an Ahsoka Season 2. I mentioned on a previous episode what may have become of Rangers of the New Republic and how that was rolled into Season 3 of The Mandalorian. What'll be interesting for me is once we see the completion of the Mandoverse, culminating in the Dave Filoni film, and there's still, it's still kind of up in the air whether or not we get the Dave Filoni film before we get the New Jedi Order Rey film. That being said, I've talked before on the show how different Star Wars content complements new Star Wars content that's connected with other Star Wars content, especially in this Disney era where all the new content is canon, really complements the content that came before it. I think I'm getting a better picture, and I know this has already been out there, but we haven't really talked about it that much in these terms. But with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and what they did with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we almost see sort of a reverse of that happening, where with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they had the movies that were all released, and now they've supplemented them with these live-action shows. We're going the other direction here, where they're doing the live-action shows on Disney+, and then we're going to get a movie at the end of this that brings it all together. I'll be very interested to see how this entire Mandoverse era, post-Return of the Jedi, looks when it's completed, and what it has to say and add to the sequel trilogy. It's been mentioned before by Dave Filoni that we would see the inception, the origins of the First Order, and it remains to be seen how deep we go in to that lore that ended up coming to fruition in the sequel trilogy. But there's a really good opportunity here in the storytelling as we get closer and closer in the timeline to the sequel trilogy. And of course, we have this Rey film that takes place 15 years after the Rise of Skywalker. There's a great opportunity here to tell this story of this growing threat of Thrawn with a new republic that is reluctant to believe that another threat in the same way of the Empire could come about so quickly after the events of Return of the Jedi, but clearly we see that happening in the finale of the Ahsoka series. But I'm excited to see what this all looks like when it's completed, and whether or not it ends up complementing the book of Boba Fett at the end of the day. Obviously, the Kenobi series is separate from this, having taken place in a different timeline, but the book of Boba Fett was okay. A lot of the problems that I had with the book of Boba Fett was just in the direction of it. I understand why they had to turn Boba Fett into the character they turned him into, because the Mandalorian really ended up carrying the mantle of what I think a lot of fans of Boba Fett were expecting of Boba Fett. The Mandalorian really became that. And so they decided to change the headcanon of so many fans in what they gave us with the Book of Boba Fett. And they told a compelling story and an interesting story. It was just vastly different than what a lot of us thought was going to happen with this particular character that was so beloved, even though we had so little information about his background until the Book of Boba Fett. The creatives at Lucasfilm did kind of have a blank canvas and decided to tell this story of how Boba Fett became who he was now on Tatooine. And again, I didn't really care for the direction of Robert Rodriguez in the series, but I did like the storytelling. And I'll be very interested to see what this all looks like and how this era is viewed when it's completed. Because it seems like most people thought Book of Boba Fett was just okay, but most everybody apart from Season 3 liked The Mandalorian, and I think the jury is still out on Ahsoka. This will definitely dictate what Disney does with Star Wars in the future once this all shakes out. And I'm really interested, just as a Star Wars fan, right, it's an understatement, to see how all this is viewed when the complete picture is finished and what it means for the sequel trilogy. I'd be curious to get your thoughts. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Drop me an email what you think. Let's get on to our next item.
We are the spark that'll light the fire.
fire that'll burn the First Order down.
Now, here's an interesting one. We just got done watching season 2 of What If, the Marvel series on Disney+. Really enjoyed it. As a matter of fact, all four of us here in our family sat back and were kind of scratching our heads going, man, we'd wished that the current storytelling in the Marvel universe was as good as what we got in What If. Because I really thought the quality of the stories in What If were better than what we've seen with a lot of the more recent Marvel movies. And honestly, we haven't even watched most of the more recent Marvel shows. We haven't watched Loki. I didn't finish Secret Invasion. I maybe we'll get back to them at some point in time. I thought Miss Marvel was okay. I enjoyed the Marvels film, but I can even express that it was just okay. Marvel's What If director and executive producer, however, Brian Andrews, reveals how the Disney Plus animated series nearly had the Marvel Cinematic Universe crossover with the Star Wars universe. By the way, if that had happened, the universes would have imploded, in my opinion. I don't think the fandom could have handled it. In an exclusive interview with Mooney TV, Brian Andrews discussed the absolutely doable plan by What If story editor Matthew Chauncey to do a special episode bringing the MCU into a galaxy far, far away. Disney and Marvel Studios, however, dumped cold water on the idea. It was probably the right thing to do. I think Kevin Feige really doesn't want to cross certain streams. But we did pitch. We actually had a Star Wars Marvel crossover. So I think it's absolutely doable. I just don't know if Feige wants to cross those streams. But it's really funny. Once you get to the realization of why, you go, oh, that. Oh, right. It makes total sense. It won't rain on anyone's parade, but it was just a love letter to the old school Star Wars, and it was great. I don't know if we'd ever be able to do it, but we have thought about that stuff. I heard, and I'll be mentioning the Big Thing podcast with Christian Harloff a few times today. I heard some of his commentary on the more recent episode talking about the next item that I'm about to get into. And he mentioned how he'd like to see a Star Wars What If. And I think I would like to as well. I thought the animation style for the Marvel What If series was really good and really compelling. I'm not the biggest fan of animation, but for some reason, that style kind of fitting into the latter Clone Wars and Tales of the Jedi, but it is very distinct and unique in its own. I'd love to see a Star Wars series in that animated style, but I'd love to see a What If relating to Star Wars. Now, you can make this argument with Marvel fans, but I think it'd be harder with Star Wars fans. I think Star Wars fans would have a harder time, and I think it would be to Lucasfilm's detriment to provide Star Wars fans with any alternatives to current or past Star Wars stories that may have them sitting back and going and doing what we did as a family when it comes to What If Season 2, saying, boy, we really wish some of the more recent movies had been more like the What If series. With the Marvel stories, it's a little bit different because you already have that with the comic books. You already have years upon years of comic books to go back and explore that told, to varying degrees, dramatically and drastically different stories than what we got with these characters. And these were characters that people had known and loved for years. With Star Wars, it's a little bit different. We have those comic books, but not nearly at the volume of what Marvel has. And those, of course, have been shoved off to the side as legends now. But to give Star Wars fans an alternate take on, especially, say, the sequel trilogy, I really think it would have ended up doing more harm than good. Maybe not on the majority level, but on the micro level, on the minority level, it would have. But that would have fueled a lot of what if we should have gotten videos from the fandom that I don't think would have benefited the fandom in the end. So probably a wise choice. That being said, I would love to see a Star Wars What If they ever had the guts to do it.
This is not going to go the way you think.
Lucasfilm needs a PR firm. I'm not the first one to say this, by the way. Christian Harloff, as I mentioned it on his most recent podcast, that Star Wars needs a PR firm. Lucasfilm needs a PR firm. What the current director of the new New Jedi Order Star Wars film that, as I mentioned, takes place 15 years after the events of Return of the Jedi, said in a recent interview to CNN was stupid. It really was. I got on this early when the news first came out and posted a video, and now about a week later, there are videos everywhere about what the director said. And because of that, some people have done some scouring of past interviews with this director and unearthed some other comments that she's made about her storytelling style. And unfortunately, it doesn't bode well for the current situation that Disney and Lucasfilm find themselves in, and specifically Disney, with how they've taken such a hit within the public's eye because of the content that they've been creating that's been failing miserably at the box office. I never thought I would say that about Disney content, but unfortunately, they've let too much of the social aspect of politics get into the storytelling and agenda and activism. And what Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy said to CNN played right into that. I understand what she was saying, but the way that she worded it was absolutely wrong. So you might be wondering, John, what the heck are you talking about? All right. So I recorded a video earlier this week. I got about 6 minutes of audio here I want to share with you. This is what I had to say about the story, where we get into all the details, and then I will share with you the new comments that have been unearthed that are providing more concern over what potentially we could get with this new Star Wars film. Take a listen. We have our first little nugget of Star Wars news to come out from StarWarsNewsNet.com. And it's a website that I go to often. They do great reporting here. There's an article by Miguel Fernandez. I enjoy his work. I disagree with some of his comments here, and we'll get into this. So let me say something up front. I'm obviously a massive Star Wars fan, and I enjoy all three of the sequel trilogy films. I was excited to hear that Daisy Ridley will be returning to her character of Rey for this post The Rise of Skywalker film set some 15 years after The Rise of Skywalker. Again, this is a film that I very much enjoy. I'm less optimistic, though, and have been, with the choice of the director, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. Having an individual whose resume includes a couple of documentary films and some credits with Ms. Marvel, the Disney Plus streaming show, doesn't give me a ton of confidence. If we were looking at a series of films and we already had a film or a few films in that series to establish a baseline of storytelling and quality, and then to bring in a relatively unexperienced director like this, I'd have more confidence. But to have this be the first Star Wars film in going on 6, potentially 7 years, if this movie does come out in December of 2026, and assuming it is the first movie that we get on the big screen, and Dave Filoni's Mandoverse film doesn't beat it to the release date, I think this is a poor choice. And I'm less confident now based off of what's in the story. Now, this is a throwaway line from this particular director. She was being interviewed at the end of the year. She's Pakistani-born, and she was talking with a reporter, I guess, in Pakistan for some event on CNN. And she was asked about the new Star Wars, New Jedi film. And Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy said, "I'm very thrilled about the project because I feel we're about to create something very special. And we're in 2024 now. And it's about time that we had a woman come forward to shape a story in a galaxy far, far away." Typically, as of late in Hollywood, when you haven't even gone into production, when we don't even know if the script by Stephen Knight is even fully completed yet, we haven't got an announcement of the cast apart from Daisy Ridley. And you make a comment that you're going to be making something very, very special. Typically, that relates more to agenda than it does to the quality of storytelling or filmmaking, especially this early on. I'm trying to think of a film where somebody actually called their shot before the cameras even rolled and said, "We're making something really special," and it actually turned out to be special. It's the second part of her comment that I find incredibly ignorant. We're in 2024 now, and it's about time we had a woman come forward to shape a story in our galaxy. If you follow Star Wars at all, you know that's a ridiculous statement. So I put together a list. First off, let's go with Carrie Fisher, right? Princess Leia. Her hands behind the scenes. But then let's get a little bit more detailed into that. Comic book, novel writers, Cynthia Martin, Adriana Mello, Jan Duursema, Delilah S. Johnson, Claudia Gray. I've read some of these books. They're fantastic. Diana Williams, content strategist for Lucasfilm, member of the Lucasfilm Story Group. Rain Roberts, creative executive at Lucasfilm, one of the members of the Lucasfilm Story Group. Carrie Beck, vice president of Lucasfilm Animation and a member of the Lucasfilm Story Group. Carrie Hart, senior vice president of development at Lucasfilm, one of the producers of Star Wars Rebels, and the leader of the Lucasfilm Story Group, the leader. Lee Brackett got writing credit on The Empire Strikes Back. Marsha Lucas won an Academy Award for editing on her work on A New Hope. Gloria Katz was unaccredited as a screenwriter for Star Wars A New Hope. Michelle Rejwan. Do I even need to bring up Kathleen Kennedy? And we have a series coming out this year written and directed by Leslie Headland. This is Rachel Ziegler, Snow White levels of cringe in terms of this particular ignorant comment. Now, again, it's a throwaway comment that she said, but it does not give me all that much hope in terms of what we could get from this relatively inexperienced director. And here's the one issue that I had with Miguel Fernandez in a comment that he made right at the end of this particular article. With a director like Obaid Chinoy at the helm, so focused on bringing equality and representation everywhere, she goes through her activism. We wouldn't be surprised if the cast was filled with people of color. So get ready for some internet outcry. Two things. One, why is everybody looking to pick a fight? Okay? And two, go back, look at the original trilogy. Go back and watch the prequel trilogy. The comics. Read the books. Right? Prior to the sale of Lucasfilm to Disney, there was diversity all over the place. The difference is, there wasn't this desire to virtue signal it everywhere. It was just there. And people could enjoy it. I'm fine with inclusion. I'm fine with diversity. But why do we have this need to shove it up in front of everybody's face and try to go and pick a fight? You're taking away the importance of the diversity and the equality that you say you are so, that you believe is so important. A good joke works when you don't have to explain it. And by the same token, right, call it representation, call it inclusion, call it whatever you want, but it's less effective when you got to go and broadcast it to everybody. I feel like things are shifting with regard to this, and I could be wrong. Again, I have no problem with diversity and inclusion within films. We've had it for a long time, and as I just laid out, we've had it in Star Wars since it started, for crying out loud. But there wasn't this desire to go and say, hey, everybody, look at what we're doing. It's called virtue signaling. It's completely unnecessary. And somebody should probably give this potential new Star Wars director, a list of all the women that I just laid out who came before her that have been crafting Star Wars stories long before she was even considered for going and directing a new Star Wars film. By the way, a new Star Wars film that she's not writing. Stephen Wright's writing this film. Look, I'm going to be cautiously optimistic. I'm excited that we're getting a post The Rise of Skywalker movie. Cautiously optimistic is my point. I'll still go and see this film when it's released. Christian Harloff on the Big Thing podcast really nailed it. And to the point where when I heard his comments, I was like, you're right, and I wish I had said that. Make your film, and then go and make your comments. Tell your story, and then go and talk about the agenda. Because all you're doing now is turning people off. All you're doing now is making it seem like you care more about the agenda and the activism than you do about the storytelling that us fans love and what drew us to Star Wars in the first place. Now, she was talking about a director because we haven't had a female director of a Star Wars film yet. But unfortunately, she didn't say that. And Christian Harloff's also right. Lucasfilm needs a PR team because a PR team would have steered her in the right direction not to make such an ignorant comment like that. Now, in and of itself, first director, female, okay, great, fine. Okay. Meritocracy, whatever. It's out the window these days. That being said, there's another comment that got unearthed, which kind of goes and reinforces. Let me rephrase that. Goes and reinforces the concern that fans have based off of that comment by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. It's now gone viral on social media in this recently unearthed clip where she said, "I like to make men uncomfortable. I enjoy making men uncomfortable. It's only when you're uncomfortable and have to have difficult conversations that you will perhaps look at yourself in the mirror and not like the reflection." The article writer who pointed this out said, "I'm starting to wonder if Obaid-Chinoy has ever seen a Star Wars movie, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she hasn't. Just a few days ago, she stated, it's about time a woman shaped a Star Wars movie. Completely unaware of Princess Leia? Rey?" Obaid-Chinoy's background is in feminist nonfiction filmmaking, so it should not come as any surprise that she said this. If it's a passion of hers, then so be it. Make as many men uncomfortable as you want, but Star Wars fans are primarily male, and they would like to be turned off from, and they will likely be turned off from buying a ticket for Obaid-Chinoy's upcoming film. And he's 100% correct in making that statement. I make a prediction. I don't think Obaid-Chinoy ends up directing this film. I don't think that she was the right choice even before these comments were made. I've said this on previous podcasts, that in my opinion, this film needs to stick the landing for Disney right now. You need to go with a seasoned director. Stephen Knight's a great writer. I watched Peaky Blinders, really enjoyed the show. I think he's a good fit for Star Wars. I think he could craft a really compelling story. I'm excited to see Rey and Daisy Ridley back on the big screen. She's my favorite character from the sequel trilogy and one of my favorite characters of all time in Star Wars. But this director just doesn't have enough on her resume, in my opinion, to be the individual to helm this series. And I think I recorded that video twice, and I don't think I said it the first time around. But if this were a series of films that were already... This was the second film, third film in a series of Star Wars films, and it's already established a baseline storytelling, and we've got a universe that we're living in already, and we know what kind of film we're getting. Bring in a director like this, go for it. Fantastic. But don't give it to him out of the gate, because you're going to end up with an Eternals situation. That's what happened with Eternals, and that individual shouldn't have directed that film. That's what happened with the Marvels movie. That individual did not have experience directing big blockbusters, and while it was okay, it lost money. Deborah Chow, great director on some of those Mandalorian episodes she did, but honestly, shouldn't have been the director of the Kenobi series. We'll see how this shakes out, but based off this controversy, fans do not have a short memory. They have very long memories. And before the cameras even roll, they're starting off with a negative, which is a bummer, because I don't want to see my beloved Star Wars, fade off into what we've seen so many things happen as of late, especially when you look at Marvel. There's a lot of time, and there's a good possibility here with this film, and I love the fact that they're moving forward in the storyline. But man, again, before the cameras even roll, we're already starting off with a negative. It's just a bummer.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, let's get to your listener feedback this week. First, Across the Stars writes, in relation to this controversy, they just can't help it, John. The agenda is their religion, but people have discovered that they don't have to give them their money. As far as the film goes, I'm assuming that Adam Driver is telling the truth and he's really not coming back. In recent interviews promoting the Michael Mann Ferrari movie, Adam Driver has come out and said that he will not come back to Star Wars. Across the Star says, with that, I have zero interest in this movie. Happy New Year, John. Thank you, Across the Stars, for the comment. Friend of the show. Always great hearing from you, and a Happy New Year to you, too. All right, on a lighter note, JR writes this. Thanks for your holiday podcast. They made me think of the original Star Wars and my enjoyment of those Lego games. Have you played through the Lego Star Wars series yet? If I have missed your conversation about that, please forgive me. I really enjoyed taking part in the story I grew up watching. What are your thoughts? I haven't played any Lego Star Wars for a long time and don't know if they have your favorite Rise of Star Wars version. Love to know, enjoyer of Star Wars JR. Yes, as a matter of fact, I've never been big into the Lego video games, but I did get the Lego Star Wars Saga. I have not finished playing it, but much like you, I have very much enjoyed going through and playing the Lego version of all of the stories in the game. And they do have they do go through the sequel trilogy in those stories, and they have a Rise of Skywalker version in there as well. I really enjoyed the Disney Infinity games. Those I'll go back and play again. Those were absolutely a lot of fun. And yeah, I've enjoyed the Lego game. I prefer my Star Wars video games to be a little bit closer to the cinematic experience than the Lego ones, but it has been quite a joy to watch it to play. And as a matter of fact, you got me kind of inspired to go and check it out again. All right, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, thank you so much. Well, let me back up. If this is not your first time listening to the podcast, thank you so much for listening to this episode. We'll be back again next week with whatever this first week of 2024 has brought, and a Happy New Year to you. If you are a new listener to the show, if you want to support my nerd world and you enjoy reading or have a friend or family member that enjoys reading science fiction, I hope you take a moment and check out my EMBARK science fiction space opera series. I was inspired by the storytelling of George Lucas. I wanted to know what it was like to create my own space opera series. And what started out with the idea of just writing one novel turned into a 7-book series available in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, paperback, hardcover, and audiobook. Great for ages 11 plus, but they are written for adults. In terms of content, just think Star Wars in terms of violence. No language, nothing explicit. Here's the storyline for Book 1 in my EMBARK science fiction space opera series. The stars are within reach. 2 rival megacorporations, D-Corp and Enercon, have made interstellar travel possible and spaceflight available to the masses. Taft Guardia spends his weekends at an abandoned flying field training with his self-proclaimed squadron and the woman he longs to be with, fellow pilot Keith Amaro. After receiving a cryptic message from her late aerospace engineer father, they embark on a perilous journey, unaware that an industrial accident has set off a catastrophic chain of events. As the ruthless Sin Argum of D-Corp attempts to exploit the disaster and seize control, Taft and Keitha are thrust into the middle of humanity's fight for survival when they discover what may be the only hope of stopping D-Corp's evil leader. Prepare yourself for an action-packed thrill ride that will take you from Earth to the far reaches of the galaxy. If you like your science fiction space opera filled with epic action and cool spaceships, EMBARK is perfect for you. Available on Amazon.com, search for EMBARK, Jon Justice, or go to mynerdworld.net. I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you happen to be listening and watching on YouTube, that you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. I've been posting brand new videos on YouTube that you can go and check out there. Not just audio versions either. We got the camera rolling again, so be sure to head on over to My Nerd World on YouTube and check those out. As always, thank you so much for checking out My Nerd World, a Star Wars show. I am Jon Justice, and I hope wherever you are happy, you're healthy, and you are safe. I'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.